Welcome everyone to the L7C podcast NBA Hoops edition. Today we are going to be talking some hoops with our hoop man aficionado, Mr. Evan Debo. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Martin. It's good to be back. We're in the thaw here in the Midwest after snowmageddon, snowpocalypse, whatever you want to call it. So we've been stuck inside. Fortunately, watching a lot of basketball. I mean, with the all things COVID and stuff, we could be in a spot like where we were last year. You're stuck inside and you can't even watch basketball. So good at least we have that as an outlet, staying in from outside of the elements.
Yeah, man, that's a very good point because it's getting close to this time last year where the season stopped and we didn't have basketball. So that's a real good point to be grateful for having.
We're about 18 days away from the 1 year anniversary, March 10th, I believe.
Yeah, which is well. So be grateful for the hoops because they've been going pretty smoothly. There have been some cancellations and all that, but I feel like they've been going pretty smooth.
Yeah, all things considered. I mean, we to an extent didn't think we'd get this far into the season without a lot of stuff. Now, granted, like you'll have some strains of games in there where some people were out for a while. We saw early on the Wizards were out for, it felt like tons of games, and they hadn't played a lot, which obviously affects everybody else's travel schedules and stuff. But I mean, no, the NBA is in a good spot. We don't know what the second half of the year schedule looks like yet. I just know that it can't be quite as murderous row as it was for the Cavs in the last. I think in their last their last 18 games played, their opponents' winning percentage was like 608. Like it was absurd, the teams we had to play. I mean, I think we've lost like a jillion games in a row. I mean, like we've lost like 12 games in a row. And I think last night's loss at 117 points was the lowest total we've given up in all those games. It was. So it can't be any worse than that. So we'll see what the second half of the schedule looks like. It should be released after the All-Star game that allegedly we're having that everybody's thrilled about.
Yeah, let's just hop right into that because this will be by next week or 2 weeks from now. NBA All-Star Game is going to be held March 7th in Atlanta. They're supporting HBCUs and COVID equality relief efforts. And they're doing it real different this year. They're having the skills competition take place on the same night and the dunk contest, skill competition, that's all happening the same night. Before we talk about like the starters and whatnot, Evan, are you okay with them having All-Star Weekend in a couple weeks from now on March 7th in Atlanta, where LeBron and some other top stars were even wondering why we're having All-Star Weekend?
It's a really, really tough double-edged sword. I mean, I think you have to operate as a society that it's matter over money. And in this instance, this makes zero sense to do. I mean, LeBron and all those guys are right. In a type of tumultuous time that we're in, where we're all taking considerably less risks to get the bare minimum in. And right now, the bare minimum is to have a season, to have something to play for, to have a product on the floor for fans and everything else, to continue paying the bills even without a lot of fans in arenas across the association. An all-star game like this in Atlanta, where it's been open for, like, the city's been one of the more aggressive cities that has been open with restaurants and restrictions being removed and everything else. Like, it makes zero sense. I don't know enough of the finances behind it. So clearly the NBA is worried about Turner and how much money they're going to lose with their broadcasting partners if there is no All-Star game. So clearly that's a huge factor. And at the end of the day, I mean, it is a job, and if the players, I don't know if that could be something. If they weren't going to play the game, I mean, the players would probably have to agree to take some kind of financial loss on a percentage of their contract or something, just because the league just doesn't have it. Now, I mean, again, the players will say, rich owner, we yada, these billionaires can afford to lose a little bit more. But, I don't know if it's that simple. I don't know the X's and O's behind the finances of what that agreement is with Turner. And again, that's where the CNNs and the TNTs and Shaq and Kenny and all those guys, that's where they call home, is Atlanta. They do those broadcasts and stuff every Tuesday and Thursday night on TNT. I don't know enough about it. So, I mean, unfortunately, money does matter. You hate to say it. I just wish, so many podcasts I've listened to, I wish the league would just come out and say that, and they haven't quite said that. I mean, they're doing what you brought up about the money being raised for all these great causes for the, for the colleges, too. I mean, that's all fine and dandy. I mean, and it's needed and everything else. In theory, you shouldn't have to. I feel like they're using that as a crutch to justify having the game. What do you feel about that? I mean, in theory, if that's, and this is me picking on the league a little bit, if those are causes you genuinely care about, you shouldn't have to use this as hey, we're going to have an all-star game, but we're going to do this. You should already be doing it.
Yeah, this is tough, as you already stated, because from a societal standpoint, you're trying to get back to some form of normal. And with this one, I felt like they could have waited a year because you have the different players coming in from different states and all that. But then half of me is when I'm watching the NBA, they're already traveling. So I don't know what that big a difference is from the travel aspect. And I think it's not even more about the NBA. I do think it's more about Turner and TNT and all the partnerships saying this needs to be on the air for television contracts and things of that nature. So it's tough because I understand why they don't want to do it. But if they didn't want to do it, I felt like that should have been talked about as soon as the Lakers Heat finals was over. Because
you're right.
I don't know if that was talked about with the Players Association, with the president there, and obviously the league office. If they're like, hey, we're making this 72 whatever schedule, we're starting in October, All-Star Weekend's happening, do you have any objections? So we don't know if that meeting was held, and if the players just said, no objections, then the NBA players need to talk to their player union.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, these conversations with the head of the legal team for the Players Association, Michelle Roberts, and Chris Paul and VP, Mr. Kyrie Irving, should have been having, you're right, dating back into the bubble. Both those players were eliminated early in the bubble. So, I mean, in theory, like you'd think they have more time. And, a lot of players are frustrated. Unfortunately, as you see it all with any kind of union, they don't always, the interests at the discussion table don't always represent the interests of everybody. But their goal is to try to get the best of both worlds in negotiations. So I get why some of the players are frustrated, feel like, when Chris Paul and Michelle Roberts and all these guys were agreeing to have an all-star game, basically that, they weren't considered, they weren't asked, or, look at all the restrictions. I mean, you can't, so if you're a player too, you can't travel outside of the country during this long break and everything too. So, there's a laundry list of other things, but it is what it is, and it's going to happen. So, I don't see anything, absolutely crazy happen. I do like the side of Atlanta for, so many other reasons that aren't TNT. When you talk about from a historical perspective, I love that was kind of the epicenter with how they did that second Christmas Day offering of MLK Day games. With I forget who they were. I remember watching the game, who the Hawks were playing, but just the beautiful mosaic of the church windows into the Hawks logo and the center court, the MLK jerseys, and obviously we all know from a historical perspective that just how important that city is and continues to be in shifting the narrative and having good dialogue. And continuing to grow as a society and to use our platform in basketball to do that. I love Atlanta for all those reasons. Unfortunately, again, it's just that's not where the NBA chose Atlanta. They chose the NBA in Atlanta because of TNT's proximity to it. So, NBA, I'm available if you need me to help try to spin this if you can. I don't know if you hand me some tough cards, but no. It is what it is at this point. It's gonna happen, unfortunately, but It's one of those things that's, yeah, you're right. You see both sides of it. There's no cut and dry anything, but here we are. So, and here we are coming into, and that marks the first half of the season. So I know you had a couple of things we were texting back and forth about, reviewing. One of those being, well, I'll let you lead here. You go. What of the options we talked about that we wanted to relay to listeners? What do you want to start with?
Oh yeah, because there's a whole bunch, and All-Star Weekend is always marked the halfway point. Typically, All-Star Weekend would have happened last weekend because All-Star Weekend's typically goes into President's Day.
Yes, it's usually the second, third weekend of February.
So, a quick thing with that: do you think this new change of having the skills competition just before the game and at halftime, do you think that's here to stay, or is that a 1-year COVID type thing?
I think it's a 1-year COVID type thing. I mean, sometimes I feel like that just gets way too drawn out. And then you've got the Friday night celeb game where you've got freaking 70-year-old Arnie Duncan, who was like under the Obama administration education secretary like 10 years ago, like down on the low post, catching lobs from Quavo. It's like nobody needs to see that on a Friday night. Like it's fun to an extent. Like you watch the clips afterwards when you're like, I didn't know this dude could ball, or I didn't know this girl could ball. This actress who maybe like had played in high school that we never knew about. Like I like those kind of aspects of it, but again, it's all about money, and whether it's the Friday night like celeb game and the rookie sophomore mashup game, or the Saturday night spectacular. I mean, there's commercials between every one of those things, and the NBA makes a lot of money off that weekend. So they're definitely taking a hit condensing it down to one, but I don't expect them to take a hit moving forward. So, and truth be told, the most important loss for me is losing that. I mean, just with being a diehard Cavs fan, and not being able to see Isaac Okoro play if he were to be invited, and Darius Garland play. And I remember going back to the Dion Waiters and Tim Hardaway trade off where they're just slinging stupid threes at the rookie sophomore game. Gosh, way back in like 2012, 2013, something like that. Those are such fun moments. We see that. I mean, the Rising Stars Challenge. Yeah, I've not called it its actual name yet, but the Rising Stars Challenge, I missed that. So it's going to be a loss, but I expect them to go back to normal next year.
Speaking of former Cavs and Rising Star Challenge, but I do remember Kyrie Irving. That's when he broke off Brandon Knight on that nasty crossover. Was it Rising Stars? Was it still called Rookie Sophomore back in the day? I'll never forget. He hit him with the nastiest.
Yeah, he broke Brandon Knight's ankles and then some.
Mm-hmm. Hit the jumper and did the push. But they already announced the starters too. In the East, we got KD, Kevin Durant. He's the captain. Then we have Giannis. Bradley Beal finally gets the All-Star starting nod. So congratulations to him. Joel Embiid, who is balling right now. It's crazy. And Kyrie Irving. And then the coach right now is Doc Rivers. He'll coach Team Durant. Then on the West side, starters, we got the King, LeBron James. We got Steph Curry. We got Nikolai Jokic, the Joker, Kawhi Leonard, and the most controversial one right now, Luka Doncic. And he is starting over Damian Lillard. And Evan, that has actually caused a stir on how we vote for these type of things. With the Luka versus Dame voting, player vote, Dame had 101, Luka had 58. Media vote, Dame had 64, Luka had 30. But the fan vote, Luka had 3.3 million and Dame had 2.8 million. And fan voting makes up for 50% of the voting, while the players and media get the other 25%. So, Evan, what did you think about the whole Luka starting over Dame situation?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately people vote from a polarization perspective. And let's be honest, how many All-Star game starting appearances were twilight of career Kobe and Tim Duncan, granted, over top of, well-deserving folks too. I mean, Dame just, gosh, man, dude just keeps getting slided on so many fronts, whether it's all-star games or MVP considerations or first team NBA, second team, all those types of things. Dame obviously deserves the nod. Absolutely. I mean, in terms of performance, and when you give the fans that much of a say, like I'd like to think I could trust us to figure it out. But in general, that's a part of the composite score. And, that's part of the reason why Luka got in, just because of the Luka name and how much we've been Lukaing for the last, however many number of years too. So on the East side of things, Kyrie, I forget what numbers he's at scoring wise now.
27.7 from NBA.com.
Okay. 27.7. Okay. But very deserving right there too. There's certainly a conversation to be had about Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's going to get in as a reserve, but in the East, that's another guy who's just, he arguably could be most improved. He could be, I don't know if he could crack an all NBA team. I'm not sure where he's at defensively. I just don't watch enough Bulls games, but that's a guy I expect to get in, at some point too. So, I don't know how you get it right, because you got to keep the fan engagement and stuff in there too. But then also, if you give it to the media, they're just going to continue to make on the, their track record with awards has been every year, hey, LeBron's great, but who else can we give this award to? And they've slided LeBron out of MVP however many years he's been in the league. Dude's been in 11 finals now. He's only been MVP of the league 4 times.
Yeah, something 11 to 10 finals, things of that nature. 4-time MVP, 2 with his last couple years in Cleveland, and 2.
We all know LeBron James is. Yeah, we don't need to say it.
But
so, well, back to the TNT thing. So Shaq had a little bit of controversy with Donovan Mitchell.
Yes.
And since that time, you have posed that that's maybe what lit a fire under the Utah Jazz, who have been on an absolute terror. They are first in the West at 24-6. They're 13-2 at home, 11-4 on the road, put up 115 a night. Largest differential in the association between what they give up and what they get at 9.2. They're outscoring opponents by almost double digits every night. Martin, just thoughts on the Jazz. Some of their production. Yeah, let's talk about all things Utah.
Yeah, I really think that Shaq thing really sparked them, because honestly, watching that live, it was a little cringeworthy. Like, they just came off and Shaq's like, yeah, I just don't think you're a player who to the next, while he's interviewing Donovan. And Donovan was just like, okay. And that's another person too, where you could really make a case that he should be starting in the West, because he's the best player on the record-wise, best team in the association. And they're just clicking on all cylinders, man. They're scoring, they're playing defense. I feel like Donovan's really ascending. He's averaging 24.6 points a game, 4.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists, and his PER is 19.49, and he's playing really well. And it's kind of funny seeing Utah play this well, as if people remember last year when Rudy Gobert didn't take COVID seriously, then spread all over those microphones, and then he gets COVID and Donovan. So that was wild too. But man, they're playing really well. I just don't know if they're serious title contenders, because I've seen this with teams, although we're talking about some Cavs stuff. Like, if you remember those Atlanta Hawks teams that would win like 60 games and then get swept in the playoffs. So I don't know if this Utah team is actually a real contender in the West. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely think they are. It's certainly been a heck of a last couple of weeks for them. Just they're putting it in and getting putting it in the basket, at all levels. They're the real deal. They really are. Jordan Clarkson, man, he's been something. He's
Ooh,
been
man.
something. Had a 40-piece last week, right?
Mhm.
A really low-key thing I liked for them that's really, I think, opened up some things for their wings, their guards, the Royce O'Neals, the Joe Ingles, the Mike Conleys, Clarksons, is getting Derek Favors back. I think we talked about it on another pod, but so obviously he's with the Pelicans and in recent years since they moved them, but I think his screen setting, his toughness has brought in a good thing for those guards on the wings when they call pick and roll with Favors in the second unit. So
They're good, man. They're good. They're obviously going to be in the playoffs, and if they can keep this historic pace going, they really will be a top contender. If the playoffs started today, they'd be playing the Warriors, which I actually think would be a very interesting series. But the team that we both picked to come out of the West, barring injury, was the Los Angeles Lakers. And they suffered a big injury in Anthony Davis, who's going to be out, I think, timetable 4 to 6 weeks, I believe
yeah,
that's what the agent said. So, Evan, how big is this injury for the Lakers? Currently, they're in second in the West, 22-9, so they're not like fighting for playoff lives. But how hard do you think this injury is going to affect the Lakers after? I think they just had 2 straight losses after it. So, what are you thinking about that?
yeah. I mean, they're they're not going to miss the playoffs, but it's not going to be a fun time if you're a Lakers fan in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, it is what it is. So I'll be interested to see. I mean, in that 4 to 6 weeks, so we're going to have the trade deadline. I don't know what they've got asset wise, or if they want to throw some crazy. I don't know if there's going to be some buyouts they can pick up. They could certainly help for the playoff run. But I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, LeBron James, you just got to give him a ticket to the dance. Don't now that things are opening back up and home court advantage really still kind of doesn't matter without fans to an extent. But I mean, it's still obviously nice to go through game day, shoot around and in your walkthroughs and everything else in your own building. And plus, obviously, I mean, there are some fans you're going to be playing with. I don't think in LA things are open up at all. But if they have to go on the road and play somewhere else out west, there might be a place with fans where yeah, come on in. Phoenix, I think might be one of those teams, but don't quote me on that. If you saw them in a matchup, but I mean, it's just basically going to be survive. I mean, they're not going to knock. They're 22-9. They're not going to fall out of the playoffs. One of those weeks is essentially going to be the All-Star week. So, and again, we just can't quite measure where they line up with the Utahs and the Brooklyn Nets and those folks down the road in terms of prospects until we get AD back. See what they do with the buyout market, those kinds of things.
Do you think they'd be looking for another big? Do you think someone like an Andre Drummond would help them size wise?
I think to an extent, it'd be nice if they had Cousins back who had a hot cup of coffee there. I would rather have a DeMarcus, I think, than a Drummond. But I mean, I just don't know. They would need him to be bought out because they don't have enough salary to send out to manage that match. So that's off the table until Drummond's a free agent. You can buy him out. I mean, I think there's good and bad with it. I mean, if you're expecting Andre to come in as somebody who's watched Andre all year, Andre just doesn't. He's a physical bruiser in the paint, man. He's gonna draw up fouls. He's gonna grab all the sloppy stuff off the glass and give you a whole bunch of second chance point stuff in the rim. But he's also gonna miss a lot around the rim. And then defensively, his foot speed. If you're expecting him to come in and bang in the post defensively against Jokic and everything else, Jokic is going to run circles around. I mean, Drummond can't keep up. I mean, it's just not who he is. I really like Drummond. I like how he's handled all this stuff with the Cavs. And again, I bet to the Draymond rant. I get it. I appreciate it, man. You got to stick up for your players. Like, you're right. There's some things there, but this was, by all accounts, this was negotiated. This is what both sides want. Andre didn't want to keep playing and risk injury where he could be, a vital part of an actual playoff team if he didn't have to. So, it's a little misguided to dog the Cavs front office as much as Draymond did in that situation because, again, it wasn't beneficial to both sides. And Drummond was starting to mail it in almost like we've seen with other star players stuff too. So that's a long way of saying that Is it going to move the needle for the Lakers? No. Is it another body with depth that you could throw in to rack up fouls on a Jokic or a Gobert in the playoffs? Yeah. So, but it all depends on if he's bought out. So, but I mean, I still think some of their, I mean, a wing could. I still think some of their wings, I mean, like they could use a little more wing depth. I mean, who knows what a Wes Matthews is going to be able to do on a night-to-night basis. Clearly, the Bucks didn't see that with him, so we'll see. But I mean, it's all about getting to the playoffs healthy. So, AD's going to sit for a while. They're going to take some lumps here or there with as many national TV games as they have. I mean, you're going to see the Lakers and the Clippers for a premier matchup, and the Lakers are going to lose by 12. You're going to see the Lakers and Milwaukee in a premier like Sunday matinee, and they're going to lose by 9. Like it is going to be what it is, and you can't be frustrated about it if you're a Laker fan. But they'll get through it. They can't rush AD back is all.
Speaking of premier matchup, they did just have one with the team out in the east of Brooklyn Nets, who they're starting, I think, maybe to find their stride. Brooklyn Nets, they just destroyed the Pacific Division, took out the Suns, Lakers, and the Clippers.
Swept it.
Yes, swept it. Swept the brooms. So they're now 5-0 against the top 4 teams in the West, and 8-0 against the 8 teams currently in playoff position in the conference. Ever since I know our first pod, we talked about Kyrie because the biggest thing is that he left. He said it was mental health stuff, and now he's back. Everything looks reconciled with that team. We both have seen that their defense is not good at all right now. And Kevin Durant has been out for a bit, and they beat Los Angeles, although they didn't have AD, but they didn't have Kevin Durant. What are you seeing from the Nets and James Harden and Kyrie and Joe Harris? Like, what are you seeing from these guys? Because they're starting to look a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, they imagine that you have practice time together, you have playing time together, and just you start to you start to gel. I mean, and I think that's part of it. I mean, they were really thrown in. I mean, James Harden's third game with the team or whatever was against the Cavs with Kyrie, and of course we all jumped on the Cavs hype train of we swept them in back-to-back games, and then we came back to reality pretty quick. But I mean, they're so scary, man. I heard somebody compare, like, when we think about the Heat Big Three and how good they were, you look at some of their role players. You look at, they had at those, especially the first year, they had like Eric Dampier, they had Carlos Arroyo, they had what was left of Mike Bibby. Obviously UD was still serviceable at that point as a big off the bench. Joel Anthony. When I look at that's what they accomplished, and then I look at the Brooklyn Nets and see their supporting cast, which by all means isn't great. I'd rather have the Brooklyn Nets supporting cast. So I mean, even with some of the pickups, so they bring, and I don't think Shumpert's got much of anything left. They'll come in and give you 10 minutes off the bench, pounding somebody defensively, playing the passing lanes. I think it could be super helpful. But I mean, they're the real deal, man. They're scary. I mean, you don't just go sweep that division like they did. You don't.
I would say with their role players compared to the Heat Big Three role players and other Big Twos and Threes role players, is that we already knew that these players were good. I mean, if you do remember D'Angelo Russell, when he used to be on the team, when he was ascending, they went to the playoffs. And this team they've been in contention for playoffs without stars. And then you add these 3 on there, and especially without Kevin not playing recently for health and safety protocol reasons. It's the fact that I feel like everyone on this team could shoot besides like a DeAndre Jordan and all that. But when Harden's driving and then he just kicks it. Yeah, and Andre Roberson, they just signed him too. But when they kick out to Joe Harris,
that's not why they signed him. They signed him to play defense.
I just feel like it's always easy money. Like you have these shooters, and their top 3 players.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I really like their. Yeah, I mean, I do really like their lineup here. Even with I mean, just compared. I mean, again, just to have Joe Harris in the wings. I mean, Joe is so good from three. Jeff Green is playing out of his mind, man. I mean, when you look at Green, you look at Joe Harris. You got DeAndre Jordan. Chris Chioza is phenomenal. I think he's got a G League background of some sorts. Bruce Brown is playing phenomenal. You know, they got Nicholas Claxton there. I think he was the Alabama or LSU draft pick from a few years ago, 6'11" center, basically. And then you got all the guys they brought in. Oh, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot too. I mean, he's very serviceable. Great guy off the bench too, who can shoot a little bit. Tyler Johnson certainly regressed. But then the last three they just picked up in serviceable vets of Noah Vonleh, Iman Shumpert, not Landry Shamet, Andre Roberson too. I mean, those are guys that have a defensive mentality with a team that sorely needs defense. So, I mean, they are firing on all cylinders, to say the very least.
Yeah, currently they're second in the Eastern Conference behind the Philadelphia 76ers, who, Joel Embiid right now, oh man, I know it's too early to, well, I guess it's not too early. We're halfway, and there's still a lot to be played about MVP, and LeBron's taking a strong campaign to maybe get his fifth, and then you have people, we're not sleeping on Damian Lillard. I think he should definitely be in that top 5-3 discussion, but Joel Embiid right now, we did say put up or shut up in our preview of the season, and he's really putting up.
They're playing great.
I never thought Joel would be averaging 30 and 11. Like that. I didn't see that.
I don't know if it's sustainable, but I mean, for what it is just otherworldly, the kind of performance he's putting on right now. I mean, it's just, he's showing everything that we've been asking of him for better part of a year and a half, 2 years. So we'll see if Doc continues to get the most out of him and see what they do at the deadline and everything else. That's a rumored return spot potentially for a JJ Redick, who I think David Griffin's trying to find a deal for with the Pelicans. I mean, who couldn't use JJ Redick coming off their bench? You know, especially in the Eastern Conference when things might be a little bit more wide open. If you're them, if you're the Boston Celtics, some of those teams. So you mentioned with Joel things you can't believe you're saying. Topic number 5. Can't believe I'm saying this, but Lamelo Ball can ball.
Yes, sir.
Lamelo Ball can ball. I don't know that I mean, we saw Lonzo is certainly a serviceable NBA point guard who has great court vision. When he's engaged, he's good defensively. Dude just can't shoot, and at times he just checks out of the game. Seeing the hodgepodge of clips to go off of him cherry picking at 14 for a 70, 80 point game at Chino Hills to like the one game he played in Lithuania, couldn't say it, to some of the cherry picking odd antics from the Australian league, or the New Zealand league from last year. You couldn't get enough of a semblance of who LaMelo was or is. And I wanted nothing to do with them heading into this draft.
Yep.
That said, I mean, we still got to give due credit to James Wiseman, who's missed some games and stuff here lately, because he's been doing phenomenal, but obviously he doesn't have too much of a better supporting cast outside of Curry right now. But I mean, LaMelo is he's your runaway rookie of the year. I was worried about from a rookie of the year evaluation standpoint, like seeing all the sweet dime passes on Instagram and the clips on Twitter and GIFs of him just doing stupid passes. If I'm like, that's what sells in marketing. So if that's what people see and he doesn't put up the stats, and that's whatever, but he's backing that up with the stats and the games, and he's shooting. He's putting the ball in the basket. He is so fun to watch. I finally dedicated a game a couple weeks ago. I think it was like before the Cavs were playing, about ready to get slaughtered out west. They were the early game on. And I mean, I just watched him for a half. I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, I mean, he's doing the Kevin Love full court passes, his pick and roll stuff. I mean, the dude's still like 19? He's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's currently 19. I mean, his birthday is like August 22nd, 2001. So that's wild too. And yeah, NBA.com has him averaging 14.4 points, 6.1 rebounds, 6.1 assists, And this guy wasn't even starting earlier in the year, and he was still putting up these type of numbers. And believe it or not, if the playoffs started today, Charlotte would be the 8th seed. Yeah. Like if you watch them with Scary Terry and Lamelo, they're actually a fun team to watch.
They are. I mean, Gordon Hayward's been having a heck of a year too. It's just they are fun to watch, man, and that is the reason why they are the 8th seed. And I mean, they could potentially climb higher. I mean, looking here, it's a little surprising to see the Celtics only at 500. I mean, if things keep up, I wouldn't put outside the realm that Charlotte could get some momentum and pass a team like the Celtics. I mean, if you look up there, look at the lot grid from 4 to 8. Like we're separated by 1 game there. I mean, they could be a 4 seed if things keep going how they're going. They keep developing, and other teams being an injury away. I mean, who the heck knows?
Yeah, if you Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, you are right. Looking at the standings, they're all one away like from each other. Then you even have like the 9th and the 10th seed, Chicago and Miami, who could also they get off down the stretch in the second half. They could take one of those. So it's very interesting out in the East. That's top 3 games.
So he's been quite a pleasant surprise. Martin, give me a couple teams that have surprised you, and it could be Charlotte Hornets for one of yours too. But so far through the halfway point here, just to finish the pod, give me 2 teams that have really surprised you when you're looking at those standings and you're thinking about just how individual players on those teams have developed, how their seasons have unfolded. Who are 2 teams that stand out to you?
This is for a bad surprise because you just named them, the Boston Celtics. Sitting at 15-15, and I'll just never forget when that team, their new nucleus of Jaylen Brown and all of them, Jason Tatum, when they were going against LeBron in one of his last years in the Eastern Conference Finals, and we went to 7 with them. And I thought when LeBron left, they would be next team up, dominate the East. And right now they're 15-15. Just of Sunday, they blew that 24-point lead that I was watching against the New Orleans Pelicans, and they're just not good. And they have some talent over there. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they need to trade away and get some pieces. They're the not good surprise for me. And then the good surprise for me, we already talked about Joel. We already talked about Utah. I would say we talked about this team earlier in the year. The Phoenix Suns, they're sitting at 19-10, 4th seed. We brought them up that they could potentially sneak into the playoffs this year. And we talk about LeBron James, and rightfully so, year 18, doing what he is doing. But Chris Paul is in year 15, and he's putting up 17 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, and he's been doing this consistently for a long time. So I just really wanted to shout him out because I feel like we don't talk about him enough, how long he's been in the league and how elite he's been in the league. And if he had a title, we'd be talking about him in a whole different light as one of the top point guards ever in this game, which even without a title, he rightfully is. So that's my good shock and my bad shock.
I don't know if I've got, I mean, there's tons of good shocks. I mean, I don't know that I saw the Sixers jumping out to their pace setting 2011 like I did. I mean, we said put up or shut up time with how they were currently constructed, and we like the moves the offseason. So I mean, I guess that's a positive one for me. It's just again looking at what Embiid's done, what they've done in revamping the roster, Doc's coaching style. You're right, Boston surprising in there. A game off, and this is going to sound really weird to say that I have them all on my like I thought you were going to do more list, especially after I watched Jamal Murray put 50 on the Cavs the other night. Because I mean, you couldn't tell me they weren't a top 3 team in the West then, but they're only one game ahead of the Celtics pace right now. They're the 7th seed in the West, Martin. This is a team that, I mean, gave the Lakers all the business in the bubble, had that run where they just ripped off elimination games, dating back to the Jazz series. I mean, I expect them to continue to grow and to continue to get there, but that certainly is a surprise for me just seeing them there. I mean, I think that they're easily a top four, closer to the top four than they should be the bottom four when it's all said and done. But, it's one of those things where I don't know if they're just, the bubble run, since they were kind of late in that too in the West Finals, that if that's taken a toll and people are just like realizing, like the Lakers are, hey, we don't have to try so hard during regular season. But they certainly got all the pieces there. Michael Porter Jr. keeps developing, but that's a team I'm watching. But I think overall, let's talk about the worst team in basketball. That's my biggest surprise. I think, I don't know that I knew they were going to be really good, but Minnesota fired their coach last night. You're listening to this on Monday, February 22nd. So Ryan Saunders, a tough call for management to fire again with his dad, who had Flip, who had passed away in the last couple of years, and they gave his son Ryan the nod as head coach. I mean, Saunders, the last name Saunders is synonymous with Minnesota Timberwolves basketball, for both of those reasons. So that's tough, and everybody loves Ryan Saunders too. But a little weird that they already had, like, in one back-to-back tweets, Woj went from they're not going to name an interim probably tonight to they're in contract talks with the assistant from is it Flynn? Trying to remember from
Toronto.
Toronto, yes, thank you. So I mean that's surprising, but I mean they're 7-24. Yeah, or not Flynn, Chris Finch from Toronto. So I mean I love the pedigree of continuing to tap the Toronto coaching tree, but I mean it is really surprising where Minnesota's at, and obviously again, I mean they haven't had Cat for a huge part of the season. We talked about everything Cat's been through, and Cat himself has gotten COVID, but I mean outside of Anthony Edwards' dunk of the century the other night, I mean that doesn't equal a win in the win column, and they're 7-24 and primed to be another lottery team again this year. So those are my surprises. They're basically out west and negative.
Yeah, on the Timberwolves too, because I don't think in our preview of the season we had them doing too well, but we just saw like a combination of like D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and Karl Anthony Towns, and you even have like Ricky Rubio on that team as well. It's just like we thought they'd be better than what they are, but they're not good at all. I tried to watch one of their games, and they're just not good. And to go back to your point of Denver being like at the 7th seed, there's some teams in here currently, like the team above them. I didn't expect San Antonio, if the playoffs started today, they'd be the 6th seed. But I guess another team that I'm not surprised but happy that they're the 5th is obviously Portland. They've been dealing with injuries, and Damian Lillard is just going out of his mind once again. And you brought up the playoff bubble for Denver. Remember that Portland had to fight just to get that last playoff spot in the bubble. And then they come back the next season, and they're in the 5th spot. And right now, Dame is averaging a smooth 30, 4.5 rebounds, 7.9 assists. Like, and it's hard because I really would, if I had a vote, my top 3 MVPs right now would be a combination of Dame, Joel, and LeBron. And whenever KD comes back and just destroys everyone again, but he probably in there too. But those would be my top 3 like MVP candidates as of right now.
I agree with you. I mean, Embiid would be towards top of Embiid, LeBron, Dame, and I can't quite do it for where he's stats wise he's there, but he's just not there for where their record is. I think this might be the year Jokic really makes a really big top 2, top 3 finish kind of thing. So we'll see. A lot to be settled. As we close in on the first half, head into this All-Star game, if however that's going to be figured out, and then on to the second half, Martin. So good catching up today.
Yeah. Evan, you got any last words? And then just quick before I throw this into disappointed right now, Mavericks, because we both had Luka in the top 2 of MVP at the beginning of.
I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up.
I mean, we're holding ourselves accountable on this.
You're
podcast.
Holding us accountable. I was trying to hide the weeds till somebody brought it up.
Yeah, they're 13 and 15. And the biggest thing that they've done recently was the Dame snub and Mark Cuban, when he said that they weren't going to have the anthem played at their games, and the NBA said, no, you're having the anthem played at your game. But that was another disappointing team. But yeah.
That's an Andre Drummond team that I think is, you could work something out there with some kind of package. Let's send Trey Burke back this way, because Kobe Altman's just convinced that we only need one point guard apparently to run our entire team. Matt Dellavedova almost has to retire. He says he's not because of concussions and he just had his appendix out. But I mean, Matt Dellavedova can't be your number 2 point guard anyway. We don't even have a number 2. Technically, it's Darius Garland, even though people want to say it's Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton's a 2. Darius Garland's averaging 15-5 this year. He's our starting point guard. We got nobody behind him. We traded Dante Exum away, who was kind of running back point, doing a good job. But we got nobody. So give me Trey Burke. Give me some other filler money to make it work. And then you can have Andre Drummond and let Porzingis roam a little bit offensively and defensively. So that's my last 2 cents. And that's where I'm at.
All right. Well, Evan, do you have any last thoughts? We probably won't be back until after the All-Star game. Yeah. So if you care who you want to pick between Team LeBron and Team Durant, we haven't even seen who else is getting drafted. But any last thoughts for the listeners before we close shop?
As always, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Keep hitting that like and subscribe button. Keep telling your friends, your family. This is your source for all things NBA. L7C.
Yeah. Once again, always thank you for listening to the L7C podcast, liking, subscribing on whatever platform that you listen to. We greatly appreciate it. Everyone here does. Love talking hoops with Evan. Can't wait to come back in March and talk about hoops. Obviously, March is a big hoops month with March Madness and all of that, and basketball really starting to take center stage in the sports world. And obviously, I mean, I've shouted him out on previous podcasts that you'll hear before this, but shout it out again, probably for the last time this week. Shout out to our own Mitchell Oso with the birth of his son, Cooper.
Shout out Mitch Oso and Kalo. So
that's 3 shout outs on Fonso. Have to worry about the shout outs when he comes back on. Talk about his son and all that jazz. Definitely had to talk about. Hoping for all the best for their family and the baby. And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. You guys take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.